journey in finding you, Dr. Garcia, was I've had, you know, I went through a really rough patch, 17 to 23, addiction, substance use, 3 arrests, emotional turmoil, turned a corner, devoted my entire life to helping young people, finish my master's, started my PhD, worked with an organization with a lot of young people that came back from wilderness, therapeutic boarding school, residential treatment centers, doing humanistic work. Um, when I started my private practice, it fed my soul in every single way. Young people with addiction, depression, anxiety, suicidality, self-harm. It was my heart, my everything. They fed me, changed me, and that became my mission. And so I built Eternal Strength, this beautiful blend between a community youth center with mental health therapeutic support. It's been the wildest ride of my life. It's been exhausting and beautiful and amazing. But throughout my work, I've looked for beacons of light, pillars of hope, people that I could help, families and young people that could speak a message that I was trying to preach in a certain way. And along the way, I would find people like Don Miguel Ruiz and the Four Agreements, Dr. Shafali and her work on conscious parenting, old school psychologists like Carl Jung and Eric Fromm and Viktor Frankl. But Josh Shipp was somebody that I stumbled on, and his videos could resonate with young people when I'd show them and with parents. And so I started to pull in a lot of his videos in my private practice office. And I had this beautiful experience with Growing Eternal Strength where I started to have more people on the podcast, and I had the amazing opportunity to have Dr. Shafali come on. And so it opened this door where I was like, who else would I have on? If I can interview anybody I want, let me reach out to Josh Shipp. And that's how I found you. And so I got your name, looked you up, and the incredible, amazing work that you have been doing in speaking to youth. And so I'd love to just start there. I'm honored to be on here with you, to have your time and your energy. And I would love for you to just dive in and kind of wear your heart on your sleeve and tell me about your journey and the work that you're doing as Dr. Julia Garcia in youth work and speaking. And we'll just go from there. And then at some point, yeah, you have to come to Alpharetta and we'll connect.
Wow. I'm really honored to be here. Obviously when I got the request, I was like, I'm not sure who this is. Is there alignment? All those things. And I was just blown away at how much there was connections below the surface, which in one of your videos, and I'm sure if you've seen in mine, I talk a lot about stereotypes and bias and things like that. And two people who seemingly might have nothing in common, when they're real and they're vulnerable and they're honest, it's fascinating how no matter where you're at in the world and who you're with, you will find connections. And I immediately found that with hearing just a few seconds of your vulnerability in some of your work. So thank you for that, and a very undeserving introduction. But I'm honestly just really, I love when we can challenge perspectives. And that's honestly one of the root things that started me on my wild journey. Is I was perceived in one way. I perceived myself in one way, which was very badly, it was very low. And I really wanted to push the envelope on that. I really wanted to know more and more of what I was capable of what humanity was capable of when we push beyond those boundaries of our initial perceptions of each other. And ultimately, it was through loss and trauma that really put me on a trajectory of I either am not going to survive my 20s or I'm going to radically change my life. And for me, it was giving my life to Jesus and doing a lot of self-help work. I mean, I read every self-help book you can imagine. I got my PhD in psychology. I tried all like the mental hard, heavy weights,
Yeah.
And then ultimately I was like, okay, maybe this surrender thing has something to it. Maybe this beyond my control thing, maybe we're onto something here. Yeah. And so in a nutshell, it was like teen trauma and really wanting to end my life and a cycle of self-hate, self-destruction that led me to, I'm not going to make it much longer if I don't choose life. that I don't actually choose to live,
Yeah.
and do that with intentionality. And so it became survival, seeking self-help books, doing therapy, then studying therapy. That was all like survival. And then it became like a switch turned on for me of like, oh, I actually am not in survival mode anymore. I don't have to be. I can choose to look at my weakness as a strength.
Beautiful. Man, Dr. Garcia, like it's interesting you talk about the letting go and the faith piece, and I'll get emotional like thinking about it. But there's just so many times where I think we're gripping so hard and trying to force certain things, and then that allowing. And it's usually when you get to a breaking point where you're like, oh, I obviously in my own individual idiosyncratic ego cannot do this. Something else has to be guiding. And I think that's the reason you and I are talking, because I didn't even spend too long. I just immediately felt alignment. I looked at your website, I looked at some of your videos, and I was like, yeah, I want to talk to her. And so to be on here and for us to connect and for you to say that you've looked at some of our content and felt that alignment, I think it's beautiful. And I think your heart is in the exact same space that mine is, which is how do we help these beautiful, brilliant young people see their light, see what they're capable of, and fight against a system that you and I understand very well as clinical psychologists that overly pathologizes people, that tells them they are broken, diseased, damaged, that they have a deficit, a disorder, a syndrome, and doesn't begin to, it dehumanizes them in a way. How do we help them rehumanize and see their love and their light and their beauty and their strength, and to tune into that and unfold in a way that lets them come into their truest potential? And it's so, I think we do it in that way where we have to do it for ourselves first. And you taking that own personal journey and kind of saying you had to go find love and care and passion for yourself and radical acceptance of who you were and see your light. And then as soon as you do that, it's like, man, if you really do that, you immediately want to help others do that. And it comes from this very pure altruistic place where you're like, that's all I care about is I want to give people cathartic release the way that I felt it. Dealing
Mm-hmm.
with trauma, pain, addiction, suicidality. If you've been to those depths of hell and encountered that in your own personal dark night of the soul, as soon as you find, I don't want to say the keys, but you find some ways out, you want to shout it
Mm-hmm.
from the rooftop, and you just want to let people know. And so I'm just grateful to spend this time and to know that you're out there doing the work that you're doing. Um, I think it's amazing. I want you to talk a little bit more about really whatever you want to. I'm like, you
It's
talk
like
about
the
whatever.
easiest chat ever. Let's just talk.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yes. Cheers. Oh, I like your cup. Look, it matches my chair.
I got it from my husband for his birthday, but I stole them.
Okay. It's very like,
It is. It's like I'm from the Southwest, so I'm from Arizona. So it kind of gave me the
okay.
vibes.
Man, we were just in Arizona. Um,
So you beat the heat wave.
yes, it was me, my clinical director, my creative director went out to Alice Cooper's Solid Rock Center. Have you been
I've
there?
never been. No, when you grow up there, you do nothing cool.
It was,
So
we flew into Phoenix, and then he's got a center in Phoenix and a center in Mesa, and it is a music and arts center completely free to any youth between
what's
the
it called?
Alice Cooper's Solid Rock Teen Center.
Alice Cooper. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, and it's amazing. If you're between the ages of 12 and 20, you can come to the center, and they have a full recording studio, music, arts, dance.
What? Where was this when I was growing
I
up? Oh
know.
my gosh. This was, I mean, I grew up literally around dirt. There was like nothing, and now there's like all these amazing things. So that's awesome because there's so many people
I'm
I
gonna
can
connect you with
refer to
Jeff and
that.
Randy. They're
Okay.
amazing, and they're out there, and it's such a cool space for youth. It's absolutely beautiful.
That's amazing. I think recording studios for me, my husband's actually building me one in our garage because that was a form of expression that I just had no idea was going to help me. So I was an athlete. That was like a huge part of my story as a teen and young adult. That's how I got to college. I knew I wasn't going to get to college on money. So sports was kind of my ticket out of where I was from and the environment that I was in at the time, which is great now, but wasn't then. And so sports for me was like one of my survival tactics, but I blew up my ACL twice. So I had 2 ACL repairs. And the second time it happened, I was in college and I couldn't do what was like my release. I couldn't do it anymore. So that's what got me into journaling. And I started writing and reading, and poetry just kind of came organically. But yeah, all that to say that I think that that is really pivotal as an art form for people. And it was for me, it was very, very helpful in me getting through a really difficult time, is like discovering that it's not just the writing that's vulnerable. It took me years to be able to read it out loud. Like I'm talking like 10 years. So the writing was one step, but it's another step of expression and like working through that healing process when you can verbalize something that you've like been thinking in your mind, when you can get it out and release it in a different way, right? We know talk therapy is one way, there's all sorts of things, but using your actual voice in a way that has no attached outcome, that's just an expression, is such a healing and powerful thing that I've experienced. So I love this. I'm going to go visit this center. I'll be there in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to go check it out.
Oh, cool. You have to. And Dr. Garcia, as you talk, I think I have this really powerful visual. I work with a Jungian analyst, and seeing things through the lenses that Carl Jung kind of saw in his study and his work. But we talk about canals
Mm-hmm.
and like almost like different riverbeds and streams. And if I think about water, in an ecological analogy, when water is stagnant, it becomes diseased and breeds bacteria.
Oh, that was so good. We need to pause that. If someone's listening, they just need to sit with that for a second.
Right? And
Wow.
if you think about it, and it's the lack of movement, it's stagnation and it builds. But when you open up that flow, water can breathe, and it can bring in health, and it can wash away bacteria and disease and stagnation. And I think all those it's just canals and channels. So like whatever it is, it could be art, it could be music, it could be writing, it could be journaling, it can be meditation, it can be nature. And it's a multiplicity, and they're unlimited. But I think our culture, and I'm curious as to your thoughts, I think it really comes back to identity when we're younger. And so we start to tell ourselves these narratives of, I'm not an artist, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a writer, I don't do good in these arenas. And our culture wants to say, you only get to call yourself those things if you make money from it. Oh, you're
Mm-hmm.
a writer? What have you written
Mm-hmm.
recently? When have you gotten a paycheck for it? Oh, you're an artist? What music have you made and when have you performed? I think we are
Mm-hmm.
all writers and artists and poets and mystics. And again, how do we teach young people, build your canal, build your stream, let it flow, because the stagnation is what will shut you down. And so what you said, here you were as an athlete, and this avenue that you had, this very rich flowing canal that was feeding you in certain ways, it went away. Yeah. And you had to be like, I'm going to go find something. God, it reminds me of, you ever watch Inky Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
the football player, and he had a horrific injury,
Mm-hmm.
and all those dreams of what he was pursuing and pouring all of his energy into now had to switch.
If you haven't seen any of his videos, y'all, yeah, check them out.
Oh man, he's incredible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
what sports were you playing?
I played in high school. I played a lot of different sports, but soccer was it was my get out of jail free card.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you
Uh,
watching the World Cup?
oh, yesterday I was ridiculous. I was like,
I'm sports illiterate. I was
okay,
like,
well, that's okay. I've actually been to the Women's World Cup. I do absolutely love live sporting events of any kind. I like when cultures celebrate and communities are for
okay.
something. But yeah, I am watching right now the World Cup. So very excited for Saturday, even though we got our work cut out for us. But this analogy of water, I think that is so powerful what you said about stagnation and creating disease in the water. When I chose to use my own hard-earned money to go to counseling in my young 20s for the first time, I remember incredible, y'all should look him up. His name is David Phelan. He is absolutely amazing. He studies like bio neuroscience, and he's also a Christian, which I didn't know at the time. And he introduced to me this concept. He's like basically telling me I'm in a stream, I'm in a river stream, but I'm going upstream and the water's coming against me. Like I can't stop fighting the stream. I refuse to go with the flow and go with the stream. And that was something I had to combat for so many years of like, I was pushing so much against everything, everyone. It was my way of pushing people away. It was my way of almost just creating my own chaos in my world because I was pushing against the stream so much as opposed to having that trust to allow it to like carry me.
Yeah.
That I didn't feel safe. So I had to fight. I had this fighter mentality forever. And it was about fighting ideas, fighting labels people put on me, fighting to survive, fighting to make a difference. Everything was just a fight all the time. And the only way I could relinquish that fight was to actually believe like I didn't have to fight anymore, that I was enough. I didn't have to prove anything to myself or to the world. And going back to what you're saying about identity with youth, and I'm sure you have so many stories and have seen so many scars and held so many like tearful people and just seeing the darkness hovering all around them and in their heart and the heaviness. And, you know, you've experienced it yourself. And when you have that kind of like front row seat to that so often, it's like you can see how much it is really rooted in their sense of self and their sense of self-worth, and that what they're equating their value to and how they see themselves. So it comes back to like this perception, right? We start to believe the things that are either fed to us intentionally, subconsciously, told to us, or in the images we don't see and hear, like growing up biracial. Like as a woman in this speaking industry, I started around 19, having no idea that it was like a space, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I was always the only one. And still to this day, you can go pick through as much as you can, and you're not going to see a lot of us.
Yeah.
And if you do see us, we're usually in a female empowerment lane. They kind of like push us in one of those, or I would be in like a specific one to being biracial. So there's all these categories, even in a space of like, it doesn't matter how educated I am. It doesn't matter how experienced I am. At the end of the day, what people see is what they see. These labels and these identities they put on me. So for me to break free from that myself was the hardest thing I've had to do, is to break free from not seeing my identity in the spaces I want to be. So when I think of youth, they are struggling and striving to find that hope in people just as much as in ideas and things like that. But they want to see themselves. They want to feel seen, heard, feel connected. And what they're getting is this oversaturation of disconnection, like false connection. And it's creating all these other side elements. And I think that's a long-winded way of saying that for me, if I didn't have my faith, I feel like I would still feel lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And wow. I mean, Dr. Garcia, I can see you as this young individual in your 20s finally making the leap, going to counseling, starting to unpack certain things, and then getting this visual and recognizing, holy shit, all my coping skills, all of my defense mechanisms, all of my energy has been pouring into viewing my entire life as a battle, survival mode, as a fight. And the letting go piece, it's such a paradox, man. I think so much about Alan Watts and how he talks about paradox. And it's like, he talks about, it's almost like gripping a wet bar of soap. in the shower, and he says if you grip too hard, it's gone, and if you don't grip tight enough, it's gone. But at just the right amount of tension, almost like tuning a guitar string,
Mm. Ooh, that word tension.
And if you tune it too tight, the guitar string snaps. Too loose, so finding the tuning, and it's recognizing that letting go and faith and alignment and flow state is so much more powerful in abundance and manifestation and production and movement. And it's an allowing, and you bring it back to
Mm-hmm.
faith. I think a lot about, and I walk with anything that walks with love and light. So Buddha nature, Krishna consciousness, Christ consciousness, alignment with true radical love and acceptance of individuals and inclusivity. And I've had some very powerful, pivotal moments in my own life of experiences with Christ and Christ consciousness, and opening my heart chakra in ways that I could have never imagined. And I oftentimes think about Martin Buber, who says, when two people connect completely authentically, God is the electricity that runs between them. And to see the divine in yourself and in others and allowing movement, I just think it's so powerful. And it's a giant paradigm shift to be able to say, I'm not fighting anymore. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to start allowing and flowing and moving in a certain way in my life that leans on trust and faith. I think it's very, very powerful. And you're right about youth culture. It's like, in a world that forces us to be in these certain identity boxes. It's all capitalistic society wants, is to be able to identify you as a particular subculture and market to you and sell to you so that you can consume. And I think we're in a time right now with youth culture where identity exploration is normal and a part of development, but I'm watching so many young people get wrapped up in that, whether it be gender identity, sexuality, orientation, race, ethnicity, um, diagnoses, mental health. It really is, I want to be seen and I want to be heard. And I feel like, how do we do that in a way that holistically honors and represents all parts of you? Who
Mm-hmm.
are you? Yes, gender identity is important, sexuality, orientation is important, religious faith, identity. How you describe yourself to yourself is the most powerful force in the human psyche. But who are you as a soul and as a spirit holistically? And that's the beauty that you kind of bring in, Dr. Garcia, is where you're saying, how do I challenge these stigmas and these labels that are only going to see me as a biracial woman in the speaking industry? You're so much more as a human soul. Now, how do you use those as a strength? Have tied to that identity that's very important for you and informs who you are and how you see yourself. But you also hold and wave a flag that says, I'm so much more than that. I'm so much more
Mm-hmm.
than society chooses to see me as. And I think we have to do that collectively. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know, man. I think ego and identity and persona, it's very hard because we get hung up in that, and uh, letting go of that, even to let go of
Yeah.
your ego and your persona and your
Your
identity,
pride.
your pride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of it.
I think there's a few things that come to mind, and I try and look at things in buckets of individual, societal, spiritual, and how they all inform each other, but breaking them down and pulling them back as much as I can in those little buckets. Even though we're talking about not being in a box, I'm boxing those in
No,
to
but it's
understand
a
them.
framework. It's a conceptual
Yeah.
framework. It's
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of how I frame when I look at something, specifically culture and culture of youth. But I think if I could just be so like blunt, I could talk about different like theories and works, but if like what really helped me the most was I take pain, I took sadness, I took brokenness, I took nasty feelings of shame and guilt and just these ugly things about myself that I felt so strongly inside and thought everyone could see if they looked at me. If they really got to know me, that's all that they would see. And that's what I lived in my head, was this muck of these nasty feelings and thoughts of myself. And I think what helped me the most when I look back, and what I just want so badly for anyone, specifically youth though, to be able to be empowered by, is that all of that is not bad. It's actually not. It was, my perception of it was that I was taught that pain bad, bad pain,
Yeah.
feelings bad, don't feel, numb, suppress, ignore, entertain yourself, distract yourself, whatever, feelings bad, pain bad, sadness bad. So there's all these like alerts that went off. So when I experience them, when I'm developing and I'm experiencing all these little things, I'm just like, oh my gosh, these are all bad. How do I get away? And I don't know how to get away from them. So then I start doing really bad things,
Man,
to myself. So for me, it's like, they're not bad. It's like, I take it. The challenge for me is to channel them. Like, I'm pissed off a lot of the time. That anger is very useful when you're building some momentum. When you're trying to build something that does not exist in this world, you need the fire, you need the passion, which is fueled by injustice, inequity, oppression. I mean, that is a fire and a flame that's never going to go out in me, because no matter where I look in the world, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see injustice. I'm going to see inequity, and I'm going to feel it, whether people intend it to or not. I live in a world where systems are designed to make my life a little bit more challenging because of what I look like, how I identify.
Yep.
So I'm not at all persecuted like other people in the world. I'm not saying that. But in my world, it's, as you were saying, like, how we feel, we have to work through that. So the feelings that aren't good, that are ugly, that are gross, we can't just push them away or work through them all the time. We have to use some of them. We got to channel them. They don't need to go away. We can actually use them for our benefit and for the benefit of the world and other people who are also experiencing that.
Dr. Garcia, like, wow. I mean, you touched on something that I think is pivotal and incredibly important, which is, we are conditioned and indoctrinated from the time we are young to think that there are good emotions and bad emotions. And all of those negative emotions, anger, fear, anxiety, pain, sorrow, adversity, difficulty, it's like our society tells us you need to avoid that as much as you can. And if you're experiencing it for too long, something's wrong with you. We begin to overly pathologize, especially Western psychotherapy and psychology wants to go. You've been depressed for that long, something's wrong with you. Instead of looking at socio-culturally, why are we avoiding pain? Why does our culture avoid pain so much when it is a transformative, transmutative agent of change? And if we are going to change and all transformation comes from that tension, that pain, that difficulty, that adversity, and then to become alive and awaken to, wait a minute, I don't need to fear this. This is really uncomfortable and it's very difficult, but I don't need to fear it. I need to embrace my pain, and not in a way where I become romanticize it or look at melancholy as a cloak that I wear, but how can I use my pain as a transforming agent? And then to your point, all the injustices that we see, whether or not they are covert or overt, whether or not they are directly, we still need to fight as a collective, to fight against systemic oppression and racism and what is occurring in our culture. And I believe it's the youth that will take us there. What they are doing, man, when I hang with youth, they are so empowered. They are so hungry. They have that fire. And like you said, if all of their pain and their sorrow and their angst and their self-hatred can be channeled into a transformative tool of agency change, now we're talking. Let's use that as a collective, to be able to build and give young people a voice so that they can transform culture and bring us to a higher state of consciousness and to collective healing and to working together with one another. And I see it in youth. I mean, like, no, I'm not trying to throw a bunch of shade towards older adults, but man, the older you get, the more, I put my pants on like this every day. This is how it's been done. This is how I'm going to do it. It's that crystallized intelligence where you're like, they don't want.
You're on default mode.
Yes. And youth is this beautiful force and energy of, it's about today and right here and right now and potentiality and what's possible. And so I love your message and that continual being able to feed youth and tell them, don't be afraid of your pain. Do not run from it, because the more you run from your pain, the more pain you will create. It's like Dr. Gabor Mate says, the surest way to go to hell is to try and run from it. Stop running from it, face it, look at it. Don't try and numb or anesthetize yourself to only experience joy. Because that's the other thing. Our society goes, you need to be joyful.
The ecstasy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What the fuck, man? Like, it's literally like it needs to be a 24/7 Coca-Cola commercial. And if you're not fucking partying with your friends,
those are the best.
And like having the best time. And that's what we get curated all over Instagram, all over TikTok.
Yeah.
And everybody's comparing and going, my life is miserable because I'm not living inside of a commercial. And it's like, no, your life is real and your pain is real. And how do you use that to grow?
I think when we think of this tension, which is, you're so beautifully like articulating how it all comes together in this messy, beautiful, like human experience. And we are deflecting, avoiding, suppressing all of the things that aren't beautiful and commercial worthy, right? But I think ultimately, when you were talking about how the adults are now in default mode, and let's be honest, we get aburrido, we get boring. And when you're younger, you're on fire, you're excited, or you're a mess, like you talked about how you were a mess, I was a mess, but we were passionately a mess. Okay. Yes. There was still some passion. So I think about as an adult, my greatest struggle since I started, I guess, my career or my journey, I'll just say, really trying to operate in the spaces that I can to help others in any way I can. It has been so hard. I want to quit every year. And those closest to me know. They know every year, this is the last year, guys. This is the last year. This last year, this last year. I mean, every year is my last year. And then I go on tour and I always see one of my best friends who's been a part of my journey, who I speak with for the past decade. He'll be like, Chica, we got to go through this again this year. Like, you're not going to quit. Okay. But every year I want to quit, because that in between, from being on fire as a youth to being a functional adult in the world, that space to stay on your path, the sustainability and the longevity of someone who wants to make a difference in the world, I feel like is the narrative that's missing. So we see people who are making a difference as adults, or who are amazing youth on fire for what they believe in, but to stay that way and then to grow into your elderly years and to be that on fire, to stay on fire, to stay lit, as I call it, is for me the tension now. It is like, when I look back, how can I be remembered by not things I did, but who I was? Like, what I believe because you saw what I put my hand to. Like, what I did with my life, and it wasn't just things I said. I don't want to be known as a speaker and things I said. I want you to be able to see the things I've done in my life and how I lived my life and know what I believed. Like, I don't have to spell out what I believe because you saw how I lived my life. And for me to stay on that path, there's been so many temptations to get off. Money, other relationships I could have been in, different opportunities, the shinier things. I remember one time I was driving a beat up car and I showed up to meet up with a friend. They're like, you're driving that? And I was working 3 jobs. I was getting my master's. And I'm like, this, to me, I was missing out and lacking because I had something I was building towards, which again goes back to the longevity. Are you in it for the long run? right? So keeping youth in it for the long run is like a huge part of my focus now, of that, those transitional years to the mid-20s, like those young adults, like how are we keeping them lit, right? Because maybe I got a message 2 days ago from someone who was like, hey, you came to my freshman orientation 3 or 4 years ago, just wanted to reach out, blah, blah, blah. And now they're a young adult. So I met them at 19 and now they're approaching their mid-20s. And how can we keep them from youth developing to young adults, then on to people our age and so forth? So those are some of the questions I've been pondering recently, is looking back, man, there was every opportunity in the world to not stay on this path.
Yeah. Dr.
And
Garcia,
that's frustrating.
you brought up so much right then in what you said. Man, I'm really just like absorbing everything, because you brought up so much in what I was thinking. And you're right. It's like, and again, it comes back, and I don't want to be the guy that constantly talks about culture and society and what the narrative it feeds us. But so many of these young people, and ourselves included as adults and young adults, it's a continual narrative of more is going to make you happier
An
materially.
instant.
Yes. And so you get these young people where the fire only gets lit if it's monetary gain and it's fame. And what you just said is so powerful. I was talking to my wife as I was pulling in the center today, and I put up one of my talks on Instagram, and we have a daughter who's got autism, and we shared about that. And I had like 3 people reach out to me and be like, what you're doing is awesome. And your talk opened up my heart. And I went on this huge rant, and I have all my own shit that I'm funky and whatever. But I was like, one of my favorite musicians, Tricky, he's an artist from the UK, and he kind of does a lot of like trip hop and really funky stuff. And there's an interview with him, and he says to just want to be famous is literally a mental illness. To only want to be famous is in and of itself very, very unwell and unhealthy. To want to be the best at what you do and your craft is incredible. Whether you want to be the best at computers or the best plumber or the best speaker or the best, or you have a message or a mission, to be on fire with that and to gain notoriety and fame is okay. But how many times do we need to watch people who obtain all those things turn around and tell us that didn't change my heart? Money and monetary gain and these certain things didn't light me on fire the way I was on fire when I was young and I was passionate and I was working those 3 jobs, working on my master's. Like right now, man, I drive a beat up 1998 Buick LeSabre. That's my dad's mom's. My grandmother, who's 93, shout out to my grandmommy. It's her car, and she's not driving, and I'm driving that. And then
I drove my grandma's car once. She's no
right.
longer here.
It's beautiful though, man. And then I got an 86 Monte Carlo that was my wife's grandmother's, and that's my daily driver. And like, man, the smell inside of them, and just moments, just moments where you're just driving. It's like, man, all those bells and whistles and all those other things that tempt us and make us think that that's going to be the thing that makes our lives happier or makes us full and whole, you never see it happen. And there was a beautiful documentary on Netflix called Happy that went around the world and just kind of cross
I
cultural.
remember that.
And it was, I mean, they went to Hollywood and they went to the places that had the most wealth and materialistic gain and fame and adulation, and they constantly found the highest levels of depression and anxiety. And then they went to communities where people felt seen and heard and brought their talents to the community. And they were collective and supported one another. And that's where they saw the highest levels of joy and communal living and connection. And so, again, I think it's what you just said is so beautiful, because it is a developmental journey. And many times people will get so pumped up and motivated from a speech or a video that they'll be like, yes, this is it. Here I go. And bringing it back to faith, it's like, yo, that ain't it, homie. You got to chop wood, carry water, and this shit is boring as fuck. And you got to find It is.
So boring.
It is life and it is mundane. But if you got those
Hmm.
canals and you're journaling
Hmm.
and you got your art and you got your outlet, those things you can carry with you as this beautiful toolkit that wherever you go on your journey, you can open up your toolkit and you have your faith and you have your spiritual practice and you have your poetry and your music and whatever this life, wherever you go on the journey, you can maneuver it because you're always exactly where you need to be. But if you're constantly
Hmm.
seeking validation from the outside on superficial levels, then you are never going to be whole. And so
Yeah. I
it's just
think
you bring up when you talk, you bring up way too much in me. I'm like, slow down, yo.
there's no way we're going to get this done in 9 minutes. I think ultimately in a content culture, I'm going to wrap all of this into content culture of social media because that's where we all live. That's the age we're in. Content. I've studied media culture, marginalized communities have impacted, not impacted, like all those things about it. I like to know who's designing it, who's participating in it, all those things. But I say all that to ultimately say, when I was younger, I was looking at self-help books. Anyone on sale anyways, because I was broke. So I was reading all the self-help books. I was studying different religions. I was going to therapy. I was doing all these things because I was seeking to be an expert in understanding what the heck I was going through so I could keep surviving. We are a generation that's seeking to be experts in freaking everything, and everybody's an expert. Everybody's an expert. It's like how to weed through the oversaturation. I don't even know. Like, good luck, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's an expert. And yes, we are all experts in our own opinion, but everybody is an expert in whatever their own field. And I'm not saying that's all bad because it's not. But what I'm saying is I like to pivot. I'm not trying to be an expert. I'm trying to give experiences. So when I come in as I'm hired as a speaker, really what I'm doing low key is facilitating an experience.
Beautiful.
And that is the ultimate goal for me because I can drop a lot. I love wordplay. I'm a wordsmith. Like I could drop gems all day long, but it's not that I want you to feel something. I don't want that. You know, people are like the famous saying, it's not what you said, it's how you made them feel. That's not what I'm talking about. I want you to experience something. And in order for you to experience something, you will not come to one of my events and not engage in some way or another, because you have to contribute to culture in order to be a part of it. But what we create is a consumer culture because of capitalism, all those things. So what I try and create in my spaces in person or in my personal life, it's very tricky on social media, working through it, is how can we still create experiences where people have to contribute to the culture they're a part of? And if I can get you to do that in some small way, whether a writing exercise, a standing exercise, maybe you're on stage, whatever exercises I have, maybe you're doing a poll, I don't know. But if I could get you to contribute, then maybe you'll walk away and be like, oh, I survived that. I
Yeah.
survived contributing to the culture I was a part of. It whether they know it or not, they're breaking the cycle of holding back, of keeping in, of not participating, of letting other people decide the world that they live in and show up to. And it's just one small tool that they will have afterwards. And so if we can, I think ultimately it's less about let's get more knowledge, head knowledge, or let's all kumbaya on our heart and feelings. No, let's get dirty together. Let's have some experiences. Let's actually contribute in ways where we're heavy lifting together, where you're lifting something off my shoulders and I'm carrying something off of yours. Like experiences ultimately, I feel like are the central root of where we can go to see sustainable change and making impact.
Dr. Garcia, and to be able to come to one of your talks and walk away empowered and saying, not only did I survive that communal engagement and experience and collective connection, but I contributed to it.
Mm-hmm.
My voice engaged and contributed to it because it is, man, it's like you'll start to see a world of critics, people who sit in the stands as others play the game and judge and critique. And it's like, yo, get your hands dirty. And what do you want to contribute to the world? It's like Dr. Cornell West says, what type of human being do you want to be? What type of virtue and values and morals and character growth are you going to bring to our collective culture and society in this life that you have? And so I think it's absolutely beautiful. I really want to be able to see you talk live and watch you do that, because that's one of the arenas that I think is so important, is like you said, the community connection and being able to be a part of it and recognize that you can do that and you have a voice and you have something to contribute. Because like and on social media, oh, you're right. That's one of the toughest places. And then you get a lot of the curated, like, when's the last time that you went to the store? Mark below and tell me about your experience of whatever. Like the communal engagement on there seems very superficial, only worried about generating more content, getting more likes, and getting more exposure. And so, how do we create an environment communally on social media that feels real and relational and humanistic and is about helping one another? And I think it can be done. It just takes a lot more
Mm.
effort and even that much more exhaustive energy to be authentic, to let people see it in a sea of people that are just trying to get fame and notoriety.
I think asking yourself that is the same thing when I first published my a book I wrote like a long time ago. I was seeing a therapist because I was freaking out. I was like, I can't do this. I can't. It was already going to publishing, but I was like, I can't. I'm gonna burn down all the stores. Like, I can't do it. I'm freaking out. And so I went to therapy because I was freaking out. I was literally like, I'd already written the thing. It was already out of me, but the fact that someone would read it, even one person, I was panicking. And he kept asking me the same question. He said, what's the purpose of the book? Every time I'd freak out, what's the purpose of the book? Dang it. Dang it. And it kept reminding me every time, what's the purpose of the book? So I think when we post, when we share, it could be as simple as that. What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of posting this today? And for me, my answer would be different from somebody else, maybe. Like, my answer is like, I would rather someone be like, oh, I felt that, than if it doesn't get a like, if I can help someone just feel something,
Yeah.
then that to me is my intention. Right.
Yep.
So that means I have to create from a feeling. I have to use a feeling I have to actually create a post to share, whatever,
Yeah.
whether it's joy or whatever. I think it's being able to do the fullness of the human experience is kind of where it's difficult on social media. I think a lot of people do it well. I think just too many of us are still working through it.
Yeah.
But it's like, there are joy, there are the highlights, but like those deep feels, without it being like your soapbox in your therapy session,
Yeah.
because that's not what it is either. It's
Yeah.
it's those who harness the power of channeling these emotions in their private life. Then it's like, you could use it publicly for art or connection, but
Yeah.
it's that private work that no one sees, that requires patience and time, that I think gets kind of just pushed over.
Yeah, beautifully said. Man, you made me have the visual. Have you ever watched Shane Kozian? I think is how you say his last name, Koyczan. He's got a
I don't
beautiful
think so.
called To This Day. That he, oh, I'm gonna send it to you.
So,
Gorgeous. It's
okay,
incredible. To This Day,
I'm
and
gonna
then
cry.
instructions for a bad day. Oh man, and everything you just articulated, that realness and that rawness that's not performative but gives other people hope and lets them move
Mm-hmm.
forward, because man, it is. And all those cliche kind of sayings like, be kind because everyone is fighting a hard battle that you know nothing about. We're all living these very intimate individual journeys, but the more that we can collectively support one another, the more beautiful. And it's just about faith again, trusting and just going for it, and then letting the chips fall where they may, and trusting that it's going to land how it needs to, and you have the perseverance and empowerment to move through it. Dr. Garcia,
Mm-hmm.
you're frickin' I've said the F word probably like 9 times. I'm gonna say frickin' now. You're amazing. Like, I so appreciate you. I know this was last minute. And again, I just followed my intuition. I was like, I'm gonna go for it, man, and see if she has time to hop on here. I so appreciate you. Where can people get a hold of you? Do your shameless plug with everything you got going on. It's like the end of Hot Wings. You ever watch that show where they
No.
look at you've never watched Hot Wings? Where they
I feel like I need a list of all the things to
I'm gonna,
watch and listen to now.
I'm gonna send it to you. And I sound like that guy that's like, what? You've never seen this? You've never but yeah, I want to know exactly where your efforts are focused right now, how
Mhm.
people can get a hold of you and get more information from you. Just lay it out.
Yeah, so I sincerely Dr. J. It's a hard word to spell. Sincerely, I spell it wrong all the time, but my socials are sincerely Dr. J. My focus right now is so be kicking back off in the spring, speaking again, back on speaking tours. So still doing that. And if you want more information, just reach out to Top Youth Agencies where I'm represented. And I'm working on a book. I'm actually trying to do two at once, okay, which sounds crazy, but I'm trying to do one that's artist focused, like the prose and poetic and all that, and then one for educators. So I'm trying to do two at once. So prayers up,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll see that in early spring or late
Awesome.
spring.
Awesome. Dr. Garcia, you are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for holding this space for us today. This is so much fun, and I'm gonna come visit y'all in Alpharetta. So
Rock and roll. We're going to hang soon.
okay. Thank you so much.